Hi, this is Alessio Rastani of Leading Trader. Hope you're well, and welcome to this week's update and outlook on Bitcoin. Now, before we examine the charts and before we examine what this chart of Bitcoin is telling us, I think it's important, first of all, to step back and address the elephant in the room. Now, what am I talking about? Well, it appears that this recent rally that we saw in Bitcoin is perhaps once again another failed rally. Now, I'll address that in a few moments, but why am I mentioning this? Because it is important to remember that as professional traders and professional market analysts, we need to remember that as the markets provide us new information, we need to take in that information and accept that information. The worst kind of trader and the worst kind of analyst is the one that never changes their minds, and they prefer their ego than the evidence and the facts that are in front of them. So there are two types of people, in my opinion. There are those who are ego-based. They prefer to stick with their own opinions, no matter if those opinions have perhaps been falsified or indeed been disproved. And you have the other kinds of traders who follow a more scientific method, which is that as the markets provide new information, new facts and evidence, and as the markets tell us that they've changed their minds, we must therefore, as reasonable and rational, logical people, must also change our minds with the facts. That is important. Some people out there, and I've seen this in the comments section often on the videos, seem to think that when traders and analysts change their minds, that is a weakness. No, on the contrary. If you can quickly ascertain when the market is changing its mind and quickly find the evidence that there is something not quite right here and immediately exit your trade and immediately get out of a position, you can save yourself a lot of money. Because remember, guys, professional traders, for them and for us, it is not about being right or wrong, but it's about risk and reward. The quicker we can identify the risk and the quicker we can minimize the risk by cutting our losses, the less money we will lose. In fact, as one important trader, Marty Schwartz, said in the book Market Wizards, he said, cutting a losing trade quickly clears your head and restores your objectivity. The second thing I need to mention is that I follow the scientific method, and I'm sure you also want to follow the scientific method, which is what? Which is what Karl Popper, my favorite philosopher from the 20th century, said this. He said, the way you prove a theory is by falsifying it. This is the theory of falsificationism. He said, the way you prove a theory is not by trying to confirm that theory, by looking for evidence to confirm it. No, you find evidence to disprove it, to refute it. And if your theory can still survive that falsification, then your theory is probably true. So that's what we call falsificationism, as according to Karl Popper, which is also the scientific method. So let's go back to some of our previous videos. In my video from about a couple of weeks ago, I said this. I said, is this really Bitcoin's last chance? And I was talking about the rally we had in Bitcoin. And I said this. I said, look, we've had 3 major rallies in Bitcoin now. We have to make sure this third one doesn't end up being yet another failed rally. And what I also said in that video was that if Bitcoin falls to 6,000, then there's an 80% probability we'll break below it. And in a video that I posted quite recently, and that was last week, I said, look, is it game over for Bitcoin? And in that video, I said, look, I still remain bullish as long as Bitcoin remains above 6,800. So there was a major problem last Saturday, as you may remember. Last Saturday, we had that major drop in the price of Bitcoin, which again, I believe was the act of bots and institutional activity to deliberately manipulate the price of Bitcoin below some major support levels. I believe that that drop that we had on Saturday was the major catalyst that shattered the confidence of traders and indeed brought about the recent drop that we've seen in the price of Bitcoin. In fact, had that act of manipulation last Saturday, had that not occurred, and I mentioned the reasons why that occurred on a weekend, that was deliberate to do it on a weekend. Had that not occurred, it's possible we might have seen the uptrend in Bitcoin to continue higher. But again, it is what it is. And as we know now, in fact, as I mentioned in that video from last week, I said, look, if Bitcoin falls below 6,800, then that's it. And that's a huge warning signal. It's like a referee giving the yellow card, huge warning signal. And of course, I said, if it falls to 6,000, then it's game over, potentially game over for Bitcoin. So going back to Karl Popper's falsificationism, has our theory now been falsified by the evidence? Yes, unfortunately, yes, it has. There is no doubt about it. So again, remember, as good professional traders and analysts, we must take in new information. We must take in new facts and evidence Forget our ego. Doesn't matter what our ego is telling us. Doesn't matter what our opinions were 2-3 weeks ago. We must go with the evidence that is in front of us right now. It doesn't matter what the charts were saying 2-3 weeks ago. What matters is what they're saying to us now, what the price is telling us now. That is a difference between ego and emotion-based traders and analysts and facts-based, evidence-based traders and analysts. And you've got to make this decision. You have to make a decision for yourself. Which one are you? Are you somebody who follows emotions and your ego? Or are you someone who follows facts, evidence, logic, and reason? If you are the latter, which I am, then therefore we need to go with the scientific method. And the scientific method says, look, it is potentially game over for Bitcoin. Now, when I say game over, don't get me wrong here. I'm not saying that Bitcoin cannot eventually at some point in the next few years go back to its previous highs. I'm just saying certainly in the short term and in the medium term, things do not look good for Bitcoin. Why? Because look, I said this third attempt, this third rally we've seen in Bitcoin must not fail. That was in my video from 2 weeks ago. I said, look, as long as Bitcoin can protect, let's just go back to this chart here and let's examine this chart. I said, look, we've had 3 rallies here. That was a rally we had back in January to February. That failed, as we know. Then we had another rally that occurred back in April to May. That also failed, as we know. So that's 2 rallies failed. Now, there was a third rally. And I got to be honest here with you guys. I truly believe that this third attempt, again, let's label these. 1, 2, and the third rally. I truly believe this third rally attempt in Bitcoin would succeed. I said, look, there are several signs here, several patterns, and several indications, especially the fact that we managed to rally here with volume above resistance levels, some key resistance levels. I truly believed that this was a genuine attempt to establish an uptrend and a potential bull market in Bitcoin, provided we stay above 6,800 and provided we don't fall back down to 6,000. Okay? So I said, as long as we maintain those 2 key criteria, the fact that we maintain above resistance, above 6,800, there's still a good chance we might rally and establish a new uptrend in Bitcoin. Again, I believe that due to the likely active manipulation by institutions that occurred likely last Saturday, and we saw that happening on thin volume, I believe that was a deliberate attempt to push this market down and indeed turn it into a bear market and indeed a downward trend in Bitcoin. And it is without a doubt that this third rally attempt in Bitcoin has once again turned into a failed rally. And I have to tell you that, again, a third failed rally attempt in Bitcoin is not what you want to see in an uptrend or indeed a bull market. In fact, our criteria for an uptrend and a bull market have now been made invalid. We don't have a solid case now for an uptrend or a bull market. So, yes, guys, we are dealing with a failed rally, and a failed rally means what? It means that potentially and very probably we're heading for a break of these key levels near 6,000 and 5,700. Now, it is true we haven't yet come down below 6,000. We haven't even come down to 6,000 yet, but I think we're very close, and I think we could certainly come down to those levels very soon. In any case, I think that the case for an uptrend for a bull market have now been destroyed, or at least made invalid. Now, don't get me wrong here. There may still be a chance, about a 25% probability that Bitcoin could still save itself. I said this before. I'm sure there are many people out there thinking this right now, that perhaps Bitcoin could once again see a miracle rescue and get once again into a bull market to push it higher. But how likely is that? I would say the probability of that is about 25% or lower. I don't think it's likely. If Bitcoin was going to do that, it would have done that about a few weeks ago, right over here. But that failed. We saw selling pressure coming through, sellers pushing it lower. Yes, guys, no. I believe that on the balance of probabilities, the odds for yet another bounce, for yet another rally higher in Bitcoin, no, I think that's unlikely. Again, I give that a very low probability. For me, based on what I'm seeing on the charts, we've had 3 rally attempts. Yes, guys, that was Bitcoin's last chance, and Bitcoin blew it. And again, I believe that the uptrend in Bitcoin could have continued. It could have continued had it not been for the manipulation act that occurred last Saturday. It is what it is. We have to deal with the facts as they are. And I believe now that we are heading for a break of these support levels in Bitcoin. And I believe that these support levels that we've seen in Bitcoin, these lows, are now going to get broken perhaps by the end of August or by mid-September. I think potentially we might see a bit more uncertainty around these areas before finally we break these levels to the downside. And again, as I mentioned before, as good traders and as good market analysts and as good students of the market, we have to respect the market. People who respect their own egos rather than the price or what the markets are telling us, they end up losing a lot of money. Again, you got to ask yourself this question every time you look at the markets, which is that, do you go with the evidence that's in front of you? Do you go with logic, reason, and facts? Or do you go with ego or your own desire to be proven right? And let me just say this, the kind of person who always wants to be right rather than protecting themselves against risk, they're the ones who end up risking a lot more and actually end up losing a lot of money, especially in the long run. All right, guys, before I finish this video, just to give you a quick heads up, my good friend and fellow trader Charlie Burton is doing a free webinar, and that's on Wednesday, August 15th at 1 p.m. British UK time, which I believe is 8 a.m. Eastern time. And that's the webinar he's doing on 3 simple trading strategies that work in today's market. So that's a free webinar that Charlie is doing. I'll be there also at this webinar. And the way you can register for this webinar is to go on the link that's in the description box. So go there right now, click on the link in the description box and register for this free webinar. Again, that's on Wednesday, August 15th. And I'll see you guys at this webinar. Thank you very much indeed. Bye for now.